Hey, what's up everybody? It's your girl Amanda. Welcome to the Buzzed Artist, a place where you can unlock your creativity and just have fun with acrylic paint. Today we're going to do another fall painting, and this one is a really cool kind of pop arty kind of painting. We're going to be painting a scarecrow, and in front of that scarecrow are two lovely colorful pumpkins. And before we start, please be sure to subscribe and like this video so that you can see some more in the future. Okay, let's go do this. So for this painting, you're going to be needing 4 different types of brushes and a Sharpie. So I would recommend getting a wide brush, a medium brush that has kind of the same kind of bristles, kind of a square tip to it. I'd recommend getting a smaller brush that has a more of a rounded tip to it. And I would recommend getting a small brush. And for this painting, I will be using 5 different types of paints: a primary red, primary yellow, titanium white, Mars black, and primary blue. I will have those in the description below. Okay, so let's get started. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your large brush, the largest one you got. And what we're going to do is we're going to be making that green background that's going to show up in the background of our scarecrow, and that is a kind of a dark fall green color. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to dip my brush in some water, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tiny bit of blue. So I don't really have that much, but I'm just going to blend a little bit. Then I'm going to take some yellow, just like so, blend it here, blend it with my blue. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a touch of black. You don't need too much black to kind of get to where you need to be. I'm kind of getting like the tiniest portion of black. You can barely see it on my brush, but I want to make sure I got like that nice kind of fall color going on. And then I'm going to add a touch of white, just a touch, kind of like the same I did with black. Okay, maybe I'll put a little bit more blue because I do want it to be a little darker. Okay. So that's kind of the color I got going on for this. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold my brush kind of like a pencil, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer broadside down my color. And I'm going to do it like an up and down vertical motion with my brush. Now I am going to the sides and the top portions of this canvas to cover it, so this is a good trick so you don't have to end up painting, or rather framing, your canvas. It already looks complete. Looks like it's a painting that was already stretched on top of this canvas. Now I'm not going to cover the entire portion of this in green. I'm going to probably do I'm probably going to leave a little box, a little square piece here of white, and I'm not going to fill in the green the entire way. I'm probably going to stop about right to where I stopped here, and then call it. So basically I'm just going to fill this in and keep going. I'm going to make some more color while I'm at it. So fall is right around the corner, and I figured, you know what, let me just start jumping into the season by starting to make what I see around me, which is a lot of pumpkins. Pumpkins are already starting to come out, which is kind of neat. And I'm also seeing a lot of leaves changing color, so the oranges and the reds are starting to come out, which is totally fantastic. So that was really cool. Fall is upon us. Now the canvas that I'm using has already been gessoed. So what that means, in case you don't know what a gesso is really just a very diluted form of white acrylic. And it's been used to help bond your acrylic paint to whatever surface it is that you're painting on, pure and simple. So because some pre-stretched fabric was put on a plank of wood and it's been pre-gessoed, now my acrylic is very easily able to glide onto the canvas and not get absorbed by the linen, because when that gets absorbed, your color really fades and it's almost impossible to to paint and get what you're really looking for. So I included a link in the description below for the type of canvas that I'm using, as well as, again, all of the materials that I'm using, like my brushes and my paints. Make sure to get the sides. And don't worry if you're not entirely sure if you want to cover everything, or like the way I kind of have it. There were points in this painting when I did go back to fill in some parts of the background that I felt like I missed. So don't fret if you're feeling like, you know, you're not entirely sure if you got the color that you really want. I always kind of look at it as like a job that you return to once you're kind of near the end of your painting. Okay. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna let this dry, and then we're gonna continue on with the next step, and we're gonna add our scarecrow head and body. Under the sea, down here it's wetter, down where it's better, take it from me. I've been listening to The Little Mermaid this morning, and it's been on my brain. Now my canvas is pretty much dry and ready to add on to new layers. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna do the head of our scarecrow. Now, what we're gonna do is I'm going to switch to a different brush for the sake of this. So I'm gonna switch to my second biggest brush that I have, which is this brush right here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dip him in my paint water. So I'm gonna get him nice and wet. Now I want to make the bag that the scarecrow's face is made out of. It's kind of like a canvas bag, and it's a very, very pale orange. It's kind of like almost skin color. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some yellow, put it over here, and I'm gonna take a touch of red. I don't have that much, but I'm just gonna add that in here. And then I'm going to take some white and lighten this color up. And you know what? I'm going to keep adding white because I really want to make this like very, very pale. I don't want it to be like too bright, because our pumpkins will take care of that actually. So just a tad more white. So basically I'm making like a very, oops, I just painted on myself. Making like a very, very, very light, kind of muted yellow. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to make a semicircle with my brush, okay? And I'm gonna start probably like right around here. So I'm just gonna start, make a nice big head. Now, scarecrows you want to make your scarecrow have a very like wide looking head, and because it's stuffed, right? So it's got stuffed with so much stuff, stuffed with stuff. The smaller you make it, the weirder it's gonna look. So I'm always a big fan of, you know what, just go big and just make that semicircle. And I'm gonna probably stop it like right around here, because then we're gonna be putting his hat on later. So I'm just going to fill in the rest here. So I'm just gonna connect those two sides together. Fill this in. Okay. Now you'll already see that the green from underneath is peeking out. That's okay. This is gonna require a bit more layers on your end, so you can always just hold off on that, make this dry a little bit, and then you can go back in when this is a little bit more dry and put a second layer in. Now, the other thing I want to do is our scarecrow has a kind of like a little collar, if you will, that looks like the bag that got tied at the neck, and then there's kind of like a bustle that comes out from underneath that tie. So the way that we're going to do that bustle is I'm just going to take my brush, same color, and I'm just going to, at the part like right around here and right around here, I'm just going to create 2 lines, and then I'm just going to make a wavy line that connects these 2 lines together. Okay, I'm just going to fill that in. Okay, can you guys see that? I'm just going to, you know what, I'm going to adjust the exposure here a little bit. Alright, that's better. Okay, so just laying down that color. Alright, so I got the basics going here, which I think I'm good with. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to paint the rest of his body. And basically the rest of his body is very, very simple. We're just going to do that in white because later on you're going to be drawing in his plaid shirt. So he's got a white shirt with blue stripes. So I'm just, once again, I'm going to take my brush, my second biggest brush, dip it in water, clean it. Then I'm going to dip it in my white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just at the peak, or at the 2 meeting points of where the bustle and the face meets, and I'm just going to draw a line going out into the canvas just like that. And again, I'm repeating that process over on this side. Okay, these will be his arms. And I'm going to do another line going out like this, and another line going out like this. So this is going to represent his arms. And I'm just going to do another line for his body. And that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to fill this in with white, and this will represent his body for us. Again, this might require multiple layers on our part, but that's okay. You kind of have an outline based off of this here already. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in. So I have to say that I was struggling with coming up with a new painting this week because I had a lot of ideas, and I was originally painting something, and then kind of like mid-painting I looked at it and I was not liking what I was seeing. Like, it did not look at all like what I envisioned, and I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start over. You know what, it doesn't happen very often, but it happens. I mean, even if you've been painting for years and years and years, I mean, it happens. I mean, sometimes you just have to start over if you've gone so far and it's beyond, you know, where you want it to be. Instead of fighting with it, sometimes you just have to kind of admit defeat and say, you know what, okay, I'm gonna try something else. I'll learn from my mistakes and try something else. And that's the beauty about acrylic painting, is that really there's no punishment. It's just a learning experience. And you're just being creative. You're playing with paint. I mean, what could be more satisfying than that? Am I right? So I'm just gonna go in, fill in some parts here. So how many of you guys have actually done any fall activities this fall so far? Apple season it just started, or actually it started about a week ago, so now that's high in everyone's mind. We actually haven't gone apple picking yet this year. I don't think we will this year, to be honest. We have a very, very busy couple of weeks coming up ahead of us. We got a lot of people, a lot of my friends that are actually getting married, which is awesome. So that involves, a lot of packed weekends and just having to go here, there, and everywhere. Okay. Alright, very cool. I'm just gonna check on his face here. Okay. Okay, so once you're done with his body, the next thing I want to show you is how to make his hat. And we're gonna switch to a the third brush in your kit. It's kind of got a rounded edge to it. I'm gonna dip it in my paint water, and I'm gonna make the color brown. Brown is literally, you take some yellow, you take some red, and you make the color orange. You know, I always like to put a little more yellow than red in my oranges. I think I like how the color comes out better. Then you're gonna take black, and you're gonna mix that into your orange. And I'm gonna add a bit more black because I do want to get that nice dark brown color. Alright. And I'm going to add a touch of white. Not too much, but just enough to mute it. Alright. So you got a nice brown here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top portion of his head, and I'm just going to draw a line where the top of his head ends. And that's going to be where his hat begins. Okay? And I'm going to connect, I'm going to make like a little triangle at the ends here, and this is kind of like his cap going around his head, so it kind of gives that illusion. And then I'm going to paint rather, just like a hump going up like that. And then I'm going to fill it right in. Okay. It looks almost like a derby hat, and the way I have it, I kind of made like a little hump in the middle of his hat, so that it looks like a bowler hat. And I have seen some scarecrows that have like those kind of like dumpy little like farmer hats, which I think they're adorable. And that's why I did it. Okay, so I'm just going to, because I want to give him more hat than face, I'm just going to go into his face a little bit and just add more of the brown into it. Just cover it. Okay. It's a little hat. Something that old Farmer Ben decided to pluck off of his coat closet and put on his scarecrow so the scarecrow can scare the birds away and not pick at all the feed in the crops. Okay. So that's his hat. And later on, we're going to be going with our black Sharpie to accent and outline the details of our hat, so you don't have to worry about that just yet. What I would say is I'm going to go back in and fill in a second layer of our scarecrow's skin, or canvas rather. And again, that's just a touch of, that's yellow with a little bit of red and then a lot of white. Okay, because I want to dilute that. Make it almost like a skin color. Okay, I'm going to go back in. Fill it in. Now because this is my second coat, the colors are really starting to pop out a little more. throughout this time, I'm really generally holding my brush like a pencil. So I'm kind of like, I'm holding it like I would any writing utensil. And I just go. I find that's the most natural way for me, but also I find it gives me the most control over my brush strokes. So I really want to be careful with where my brush goes. The closer that you choke up to your brush, the more control you get, versus getting your brush out like this, because that does nothing, at least for me. So I'm just gonna go back in, fill in my colors. Oh, he's cute. He's coming out quite nicely. Okay. So I'm gonna make this dry a little bit, and we're gonna come back and I'm actually gonna show you guys how we're gonna do our pumpkins, okay? Be right back. Okay, welcome back. So now we're gonna be making the two pumpkins that our Scarecrow is kind of chilling out in. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and still use that rounded brush that we were using prior. So it's this guy right here. And what I'm gonna do is now I'm actually gonna start with a lighter orange color. We're gonna make the base of our pumpkin, and then we're gonna go back in later and add like those variety of kaleidoscope colors that our pumpkin scene has, which is gonna make it look really cool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some yellow, and I'm gonna take a little bit of red. Remember, I like to do a lot of yellow versus red. It helps to, I really think it makes it look a lot more pumpkin-y and more like orangey. So I'm gonna take a white, I'm gonna combine that until I get like what looks to be like a pale pumpkin, pale like orange color, just like so. And what I'm gonna do is, holding my brush like a pencil, I'm gonna start by making a brush stroke just like this. This is gonna represent the top of my pumpkin. And then another brush stroke just like so, kind of going off into his body, just like that. Okay. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this kind of center of the pumpkin here. And the center of the pumpkin looks like a teardrop. This is how I kind of calibrate how my pumpkin is going to look like and how big he's going to get. So I always start by kind of figuring out like where are my two sides and then where my center rind of the pumpkin is. So I'm going to put them like right around there. Then what I'm gonna do is, once I kind of have my center here, I'm going to make another brush stroke like so, and another brush stroke on the other side like so. Okay? So this is kind of representing like the second rind that is adjoining the first rind, and so on and so forth. So this kind of tells me how big my pumpkin's gonna be. So I'm kind of like repeating that. So once I make that stroke, I make another stroke like that, and then another one. And then this kind of brings us to our outer rind of the pumpkin. And you know what? I'm gonna make it bigger because we can. And this is where creativity really comes into play. You can kind of eyeball how big you want your pumpkin to be. I like this pumpkin to be big, so I'm just going to go in there. I'm going to fill this in. I'm also getting the size as well. Okay.
because we can. It's the beauty of paint. You can kind of like put it down and then kind of look at it and be like, you know what? I want to do this. I want to add this. Okay. I'm just going to fill in the rest of the pumpkin. Now, don't worry about losing the rind partitions. You're going to be going back in with a different color that's darker to help kind of separate. And then again, you're going to be going back in with like a Sharpie that'll help you distinguish between the different rinds. Okay. So now that you kind of have a base color down, now it's time to play. What I'd like to do next is that same orange color that we made. I'm gonna add a bit more red to it this time. So I know I'm gonna keep using that yellow, but I'm gonna have a proportionally larger amount of red, and then I'm gonna go ahead and add some white to help mute that color a little bit. Okay. So basically, the point is you want to make an orange color that's you know, richer and darker than the first one that you laid down on your pumpkin, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start where you had made that center in your pumpkin, and I'm just going to go ahead and outline that with this color. Okay. You can kind of see that it's not super apparent. It will be a lot more apparent once you have the black lines that are separating it. But now I would just recommend, you know, different colors. You can just go in and add the rinds and where they would end up. So I'm gonna make another rind like this. And the way the rind is shaped is kind of like it widens at the base of the pumpkin and then kind of comes to a point at the top. Okay, so that's kind of how you're going to be doing your rinds, and I would just alternate between the base color you put down and then like another color that you made. So I'm going to use that dark red again to do another rind up here. Okay, and notice I'm not doing it like all together consecutively, because that will just make all the rinds fade. Okay. Okay, so you can kind of see that, right? I'm starting to make those rinds, and I'm going to go back and forth. So you know, some of my reds, my other rind colors, I'm going to make like deeper red. Others, I'm going to add more white so I can lighten it up. So I'm going to do another one right here. Once again, you want to make sure that the base is bigger than the top. So you're just going to do that. Okay. Now, usually what I like to do is, now that I kind of have like the rinds reestablished again, I like to go back to the other rinds that, or rather the original color that we had laid down, and make like some lighter versions of it. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to add some yellow, a tiny bit of red, so I get like a very light, very, very, very light orange, and I'm going to add that with some white. So it's going to kind of make like a very muted orange, yellow color, and I'm just going to go in and just distribute that on a rind, depending on where I want it. This is where you can get creative. You can go in different colors. You don't have to use the same colors I'm using. You can decide to use, like, if you want to go and do purples, and if you want to do like different tonalities of blue and green, you know, be my guest, go for it. This is your painting. This is your time to do what you would like. Okay. You know what? I'm going to add a darker rind next to this one because it's a little too big. So I'm just gonna go back in. And see, that's the beauty of this. It's like you can kind of eyeball and be like, you know what? Nah, you need to be red now. Just like so. Okay. And you know what? You can go back and forth. So, you know, later on in the painting, if you're looking at this and be like, you know what? This could really use more of this. You can always go back in and do it. It's not a big deal. Okay? But at least you're laying down the foundation. You kind of know what you got to go and do. Now, because some of the color from underneath is going to seep through, you might need to do multiple layers, but that's okay. You just wait for this to dry a little bit, and then you can go back in a little later and add your color so that it really, really helps to pop. So I figured while you're waiting for your first pumpkin to dry, we can actually start to do the plaid pattern on our Scarecrow's shirt. So once you have the white to where you want it to be, then what you're going to do is you're going to take the smallest brush that you have in your kit. Okay, you're going to dip that in water, and you're going to dip it in just straight up blue. Okay, so I'm just going to dip my brush in blue. Now what I'm going to do is very carefully, I'm just going to make a plaid pattern, and I usually like to start where the arms are. So I'm going to do the seam of his shirt, which will go down like so. Again, kind of where his shirt meets his body. Like that. Okay. And I'm just going to follow the pattern. So I'm just going to make a line. Now I like the lines to be a little closer together, so I'm just going to kind of go back in and add it where I see fit. Okay. And then, to make the crisscross pattern, obviously you would just go ahead, make lines going across the other lines you made. Really what you're looking to do here is just create like a pattern. Just like so. Okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to create that pattern. It just creates that really cool fall motif. You know, there's different types of strokes, different types of stuff going on with your paint. I'm gonna continue that on the side here. So I decided to play with the camera angle today. Usually I'm standing up and you guys are kind of like looking over my shoulder. This is a little different, whereas I'm sitting this time and I'm just kind of narrating as I'm going. So comment below, do you like this kind of format? Do you like the old format? Let me know in the comments below. Now I'm going to go into his body and I'm just going to do vertical lines. Now don't worry if a little bit of your line goes into like his little tassel or the pumpkin itself. That's totally okay. The borders of all this stuff is going to get covered in Sharpie anyways, so it's not that big of a deal. And then once again, all you're gonna do is just cross your lines. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start here and make my cross pattern. Now I'm not going to add the cross pattern where the sleeves are because I like to think this is like kind of stitched together fabric. So the pattern itself doesn't exactly match up, which I'm okay with. And that's pretty much how you do a plaid shirt. This is obviously very simplistic, and it doesn't, you know, it's a very simplistic looking pattern, but already it's kind of giving a little different vibe to your painting. So I'm a big fan. And you can go back in, add some more lines if you want to add some complexity. If you want, you can add like bigger stripes, or you can make even bigger plaid patterns. This is totally up to you and your preference. Okay, right on. And if you feel like you're kind of having trouble holding your brush steady, you know, one thing you could do is work on one half, wait for it to dry, and then go on the other half, and you can just kind of place your palm down. Usually that helps to create a little bit of a balance. Okay. So I'm gonna wait for this part to dry a little more, then I'm gonna work on the second pumpkin. Actually, once we have this done, what I'm gonna do next is, once you're kind of happy and satisfied with your scarecrow face, we're gonna go in and start to add in his little details on his face, and we're gonna add in his nose. So what I would suggest is we're gonna go back to our rounded brush, and we're gonna dip it and make sure it's nice and clean. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a like a very light pink, or rather not pink, but like kind of like a deep pink color. I kind of just pulled the same pink color we made with our pumpkin, and I'm just gonna go in and make a little triangle for the nose. Now, if you want a little more control, you can go to the smallest brush and use that. But really, all I want is to make that. Okay? And then next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make his eyes. Now, his eyes are simply 2 black circles. So I'm going to take the same brush, I'm going to dip it in my black paint, and then I'm just going to make 2 very big circles. Don't skimp out on the circles, because these are his buttons that kind of form his eyes. And buttons can be of any size and different shape. If you want, you can even make both his eyes like 2 different shapes if you wanted to get creative. So I'm gonna add that in just like so. Okay. Now it gets fun. So now I'm gonna make his broad smile, and we're gonna move on to our Sharpie, okay? And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to start at the side of his face. You know what, I'm gonna get a better marker. Okay, so I'm gonna start at the side of his face, just gonna make a grin. Just like that. And then, once I have a grin, I'm just going to make an X mark where the grin ends. It could be that your paint would not have dried. I thought mine was dried, but I guess could use a little drying. Okay. And all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make a line going across the line here. Just like so. So it creates like this kind of grin that our Scarecrow is doing. Okay. So go ahead and add some more details that you want to his face. If you want to lighten up or add more layers, more colors, go for it. So because my paint is still a little wet and I'm impatient, I decided to just switch to my smallest brush and dip it in black and just to create little outlines. So I went over and redid his grin, and I'm gonna start to just outline his face. So I'm just gonna follow the outline of what I did. This is literally the easiest thing ever because you're just creating a black outline all around him. So I'm just going to create just like so. I actually like to make my lines pretty thick, so I'm gonna go back in and add some more dark black lines. And it almost gives you like a very comic book-esque kind of a feeling, which I'm always a big fan of. I love doing comics. Used to be a hobby of mine back when I was kid, especially during the summer. I used to love to make my own comics, and I guess the style of it appealed to me so much and I loved it. So I'm kind of making the black line where his hat is, and I'm going to extend the black line. Black triangle on the two ends to represent kind of like the hat going around his head. And then I'm just going to create the rest of the outline for his hat. I'm going to do the lapel of his hat. So I'm just going to follow with the black. Just like so. And I'm just going to outline. What's really cool is that because your black is kind of acting like that outline, your colors start to kind of stand on their own in a way. And thus kind of giving you that very like polished, clean look. And I'm just gonna go ahead and add this here. Now you'll notice I'm kind of doing this out of order of what you would think things would get done, and I'm only doing it just for the sake of time. You do need to like wait for some other aspects on the canvas to dry, so I figured might as well, since you're here, might as well show you all the other stuff. Now I'm gonna do a little line here to represent like that, like a tie of some sort that's tying his head together to like the pole or whatever that's in back of him that is obviously not going to be painted. But it gives that appearance of like his head is tied back, so he's like stuffed with leaves or straw. So he's filled to the brim. Okay. Now one thing I like to do is I like to add like little lines here, kind of representing like in a comic book-esque way like the texture of the fabric. I'm also gonna do like little lines here to show like how taut the fabric is on him. Kinda gonna do it on both sides. Just like that. So it looks like it's being held very, very tight on him. And I'm also gonna do the outline of his shirt. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add a black outline for his shirt. And I'm gonna do the other one on this side here, just like so. Now, I'm also going to do a line kind of where his body and his arm begins to show like the seam of his shirt. So I'm going to represent that with two black lines. I'm going to make another line here, another one here to finish that off. Now I'm going to hold off on this pumpkin for now. I want to do the other one first and then we'll add the details in later. Rather the black line later, so I'm gonna just finish up here. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back in and fill in the black areas that I feel could use a little bit more. So go ahead, have some fun, do your thing. If you feel like you just want to kind of keep going and add a bit more of the details, go for it. I'm just going to add in the outline on his nose. So when I say a Sharpie for this, if you are just not steady with paint, Sharpie is the way to go. So the downside of using a Sharpie though is you have to wait for your canvas to completely dry, which, you know, if you don't really have the time or you just kind of want to get this going, you don't want to stunt creativity, then going with black paint would be your best bet. Now I do want to show you one more little thing for his eyes. So because his eyes are made out of buttons, he's got two little buttonholes, and the way we're going to do that is I'm going to just take a brush that has like a rounded tip. So if you have your brush, there's like the bristle side and then there's like the actual wood part of the brush. So turn that upside down and go to the wood part to the bottom. And where you already see the white is like a past painting project I did, but you're going to take the end of the dowel, you're going to dip it in white, okay? And what you're going to do is simply you're going to gently place one dot on each side of the eye to represent like where the button holes would be, just like so. And that's it. So I'm going to let this dry and we're going to work on our second pumpkin. Okay, so now we're gonna finally do our second pumpkin. So what you're gonna do is just pretty much repeat the first process that we did. We're gonna use our rounded brush, so make sure you get that nice and clean. And we're gonna be using the color orange. So I'm just gonna take some yellow. I like to use a lot more yellow than red. And I'm just gonna combine that with some red. Not too much red, like I said before. And then I'm going to combine that with some white so I can kind of mute that color down a little bit. Okay, so kind of looks like this. basically you just want like an orange color. So now I'm gonna go in and this pumpkin's gonna be a smaller one than the other pumpkin, so I'm just going to make one line for one side of the pumpkin, and I want it to go into my first pumpkin that I made. So I'm gonna make that one here, and then I'm gonna make another like little hump right around here somewhere. And it kind of goes off into the canvas. And then I'm gonna make like that teardrop shape in the center. And then I kind of fill it in with like where I think the rinds would be. So like here. And this is kind of where I figure out like, okay, I could make this part like a little bit bigger. I could make this part a little bit smaller. You know, pretty much my preference, what I want to do. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill this in. Has anybody gotten their pumpkins yet? Are you guys big are you into carving pumpkins? Are you into just kind of getting them and kind of putting them all over the house? I've seen different types of people kind of have different types of preferences. You know, some people really like to carve. They can't not carve their pumpkin. Other people actually just like to have them, dispersed around the house. Sans carving. So what's kind of your preference? What do you like? And you're going to be doing multiple layers once again with this color, because the green and like the kind of the bit of the plaid shirt of our Scarecrow kind of seeps out a little bit. So you're gonna have to go in, every once in a while and kind of add more coats. Like with the first pumpkin, I'm gonna go back in and add my second coat, so that while my pumpkin here is being set up and ready to go, just go ahead and get that done. And plus it adds like cool color varieties as well. More yellow. Come on, I got some yellow. I know I got some. Mustard. So I'm just going in, adding in my second layer of color so that the background doesn't kind of seep in and ruin everything. Now, what we're gonna do next is I'm gonna show you guys how to make again that dark red rind, and we're gonna go in and add those into our second pumpkin. Okay, so this is kind of the same as what we did last time. I'm gonna take a bit more red this time, and I'm gonna take a little bit of yellow, so I don't want too much yellow. And then I'm gonna add some white. Okay. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit more yellow. I do want that orangey kind of tone. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a rind like right on the edge here. And again, rinds are bigger on the bottom and they kind of thin out at the ends to the pumpkin center. Okay. And I'm going to probably do another one here in the center. And again, I'm making sure to skip every other rind so this doesn't all blend together. So I'm gonna make another rind here. Maybe like another one right there. Alright, cool. Now I'm gonna go in and just like, again, add some more layers to my first pumpkin. So, take some time for this to dry, go back in with more layers if you want to, and then join me for the last step and we're gonna finish up and do the last details of our drawing or painting. Here we go. Okay, so now that my pumpkins are pretty much close to drying, I'm gonna do a couple things. I'm going to make the stems of the pumpkin, and then I'm gonna actually outline the rinds in black, and then just do a couple more finishing touches, and then we'll be all done, okay? I know it's been a very involved process, just a lot of laying down paint and then just waiting for it to dry, so that could be a little bit frustrating. But here you go, you're gonna take your rounded tip brush, clean it, and dip it in black, okay? And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go to the center of where the pumpkin rinds all meet up, and I'm just going to paint the stem of the pumpkin. So usually a pumpkin stem, the stem itself is starts off big on the base and then kind of goes and gets smaller towards the end. So that's kind of what my stem is going to look like. And again, I'm going to go to the edge of this pumpkin, or to the point where all the rinds come together, and make a wide base. And then I'm going to just create the stem. And that's pretty much how you make stems for a pumpkin. So now comes the fun part. Now you can fill in and outline the rest of your pumpkin with your black. So you can either go and use the smallest brush that you have, or you can continue on with a rounded tip. It's totally up to you, wherever you feel like you have the most control. So, or you can move on to your Sharpie. So I'm gonna check to make sure that I can actually use the Sharpie now with this. No, okay, so it kind of crapped out on me a little bit. That's okay. Let me see if any other kind of Sharpie I have here works. No. Sometimes you gotta go through a couple. Yeah, no. Okay, so I'm gonna stick with paint. See, this is what happens. You gotta be adaptable. So I'm gonna go with my smallest brush, and I'm just gonna dip it into my paint, my black, and I'm just going to go ahead and create the outline. Simple. And I'm just going to follow the rinds where I lay them down with the different colors. And then once you start to do that, you start to really see kind of like that kaleidoscope effect of the different rind colors and how they all kind of play with each other. And you can always go back in again later and create, add in more color if you really want to. This is totally up to you. But because you're laying down the black and kind of seeing like what it all looks like when it's all tied together, you can kind of get a better idea of what to expect and what this is going to look like. And again, I'm holding this like a pencil so that I can get better control over it. So it's starting to really come together. Now the one thing that I guess I really like about comic book effect kind of paintings, especially like when you're doing black outline like this, is that you don't have to really rely too much on shadows or like blending techniques as much, because this has already got like a very cartoony kind of feel to it. And if you've ever seen a cartoon, like, you know, like a more pop kind of cartoon, yeah, there is shading, but it's not as like intense as, say, like a still life painting. So in some ways it is easier to do, or at least I always think it's a little easier to do. It's really starting to come together. And something to kind of help with where all the black lines kind of come together, where the stem is on the pumpkin, I just kind of like go in and kind of feather until like all the lines kind of look like they come together quite nicely. And if they don't, it's not that big of a deal. It's really not that big of a deal, but just in case you're kind of like struggling with that, that should help you out a lot. I'm gonna go in with my second pumpkin, add in my lines. Too bad that the Sharpie failed, because usually when it comes to Sharpie, you get the most control, because obviously it is like a pencil. It has like the tiniest tip possible. It's not like a brush tip where it does have a bit of give to it. Pretty much with the Sharpie, what you see is what you get, which is something I like about it. Okay, so I'm just gonna, again, outline. And again, I like to make my lines a little bit more broader. It helps to really create that cool comic book effect. Again, I'm making sure that the lines kind of carry out to the edge of the canvas. Kind of creates that like continuous, like, you know, not just in the front portion of the canvas kind of look. So it looks like it's an actual painting that was pulled over wood. Okay. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to just add like little details with the black, and then I'm gonna add the final details with some white. And then that's really gonna make your scarecrow look super cute. Okay, so the portion where on his shirt, where his sleeves meet his body, we're gonna make a stitch together kind of look, and really it's that black line we laid down before. And what I'm just gonna do is I'm just gonna make some lines going across like a stitch. Just gonna do that, just like so. And then I'm gonna make the center of his shirt, but it has buttons to it. So I'm just gonna make a line going down, another line going down next to it. Then I'm gonna do 2 little circles in black for his buttons. If you have a bit more room on his shirt, you can go ahead and add a 3rd button, which I think I will do actually. A little 3rd button right there for him. Of course, I'm just going to fill in a little more here, because why not? Okay. And then next, what you're gonna do, let's see here. Just gonna fix. Okay. So, now that we pretty much have everything outlined for the most part, now what you can do is we're gonna add the finishing touches of the white. So I'm gonna clean my brush, give it a nice rinse. We're still gonna stick with the smallest one. What I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna dip it in my white paint. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add little brush strokes as like little highlights and accents. So I'm gonna go on the brim of his hat, add some white strokes to it. Let's see, I'm gonna add some strokes to the pumpkin itself. And I'm just gonna do a couple lines, following the edges of the pumpkin, just like so. I'll do the same on this side. And it really does add like a very nice clean look to your pumpkin. It's very adorable. Okay. Now I'm just placing the highlights on like certain portions of the rind, and this is just to represent like where the light would hit on the pumpkin itself. So I'm imagining it's like right on top of our scarecrow. So like the center rind, I'm not going to give it any kind of highlight because it's technically going to be the darkest point of the pumpkin. I almost called it pineapple, I don't know why. And then the rest kind of get their own lines. And then I'm going to add some more here, here, and here. And then I'm going to add some little highlights on the actual stems of our pumpkin that we made. So I'm just going to just add like little white lines. Doesn't have to be too crazy, just like little lines to show like that there's like some sort of pattern, some sort of like something happening here. So that's pretty much the premise of our little scarecrow painting. So you can go in, keep adding more details, keep creating and adding more of the black outline to kind of give it that more completed look. But this is pretty much it.
Hey guys, I hope you had a good time today spending time with me and painting this beautiful and super cute scarecrow and pumpkin scene. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more future videos. And once again, my name is Amanda. Thank you so much for watching. See you later.